The night was quiet on the strange alien world. Two pale moons hung in the sky, casting silver light across the dusty ground. In the middle of that lonely land sat a little alien girl. Her body was thin, her skin pale, and her eyes far too big for her small face. She looked fragile, almost broken, like a doll that had been dropped too many times. She could not walk. Her legs were twisted and weak. Every time she tried to stand, she fell back down. The others of her kind did not care. They passed by her without stopping. Some looked at her with pity, some with disgust, but most simply ignored her as if she did not exist. The girl dragged herself forward with her hands, moving slowly across the ground. The dirt scraped against her skin, but she made no sound. She was used to pain. Pain was her normal. She crawled to the edge of a small market where food and light filled the air. She watched the other children laugh and run. She watched them chase each other, their legs strong and fast. Her eyes filled with tears, but she did not cry out. No one ever listened when she cried. The first time she had cried loudly, people told her to be quiet. The second time, they laughed at her weakness. After that, she learned to cry in silence. She sat in the shadows, her small hands clutched around her knees. She was always hungry. The smell of cooked food drifted from the market stalls, making her stomach twist in pain. She wished someone would notice her just once. She wished someone would ask, "Are you hungry? Are you hurt?" But no voice came. The little alien girl had a name once, but even she did not use it anymore. No one called her by it. No one remembered. To the world, she was simply the broken one. And so in her mind, she began to think of herself as that too. Every night, she lay on the cold ground and looked up at the stars. She wondered what it felt like to stand tall, to walk, to run. In her dreams, she ran across fields of light, her feet strong beneath her. She was not broken in her dreams. She was free. But when she woke, the cruel truth returned. She was trapped in a body that refused to carry her. One evening, as the moon shone brighter than usual, she tried again. With all her strength, she pushed against the ground. Her arms shook, her weak legs trembled. For a moment, she rose. For a moment, she stood. But then her knees bent and she fell hard against the dirt. The fall hurt, but what hurt more was the sound of laughter. Two young aliens had seen her trying. They laughed loudly, pointing at her as if her pain was the funniest thing they had ever seen. The girl lowered her head. She wanted to disappear. She wanted to sink into the ground and never return. Still, she said nothing. She crawled away from them back to her shadow. Alone. Always alone. There were whispers in the town about her. Some said she was cursed. Some said she was punished by the stars. Others said she was not worth saving. The little girl heard these whispers, and though they broke her heart, she pretended not to. She built a wall of silence around herself because silence was easier than hope, and yet deep inside her small heart, a spark of hope refused to die. A voice whispered inside her, faint but steady, "Maybe one day someone will see me. Maybe one day someone will help." That hope kept her alive. That hope kept her crawling forward, even when her body ached and her spirit grew heavy. On this night, she dragged herself to the edge of a dried-up fountain. She leaned against it, her arms too tired to carry her further. She rested her head against the stone and closed her eyes. Her breaths came shallow and slow. She wanted to sleep, but she was afraid. In sleep, she would dream again, and dreams were painful when the morning always stole them away. The moons moved across the sky, and the market grew quiet. The laughter of children faded. The torches burned low. One by one, the lights of the stalls went dark. Still, no one looked for her. No one asked where the broken girl was. She was there alone, at the edge of the fountain, watching the last shadows fade. A cold wind swept across the land. She shivered and hugged herself tightly. Her body was small and fragile, but her eyes still lifted to the stars. She wondered if the stars had answers. She wondered if somewhere beyond this cruel place there was a world where even broken children could walk. She did not know it yet, but the next sunrise would bring change. Her life, which had always been filled with silence, hunger, and pain, was about to be shaken. Somewhere out there, a man had already taken his first step toward her world. A man who would not laugh at her, not ignore her, not call her cursed, but tonight, she was still only the broken girl under two moons, waiting, without knowing, for the day someone would finally see her. Morning came slowly on the alien world. The two moons sank behind the mountains, and a weak golden sun rose into the sky. The streets filled with noise. Merchants shouted, children played, and workers rushed past carrying tools and food. The world seemed alive with energy, but for one little alien girl nothing changed. She woke where she had fallen asleep beside the broken fountain. Her arms ached from crawling and her thin legs were stiff with pain. She blinked against the light and pulled herself into the shadows before anyone could step on her. She had learned to move early before the crowd arrived. If she was too slow, she became part of the dirt that others walked over. No one stopped to ask how she had slept. No one offered her a hand. To them, she was nothing but a shadow in the corner. The little girl's stomach growled loudly. She was always hungry. In the market, piles of fruit and hot bread steamed in the morning air. She could smell roasted meat turning on spits and her mouth watered. Slowly, she crawled closer, just hoping that someone might notice her empty eyes and give her a piece. But when she stretched out her hand, a merchant's foot came down hard in front of her. Not you, he barked. Go away, broken one. His voice was sharp, as if her presence was a crime. The girl pulled her hand back quickly. She whispered no reply. She dragged herself toward another stall where a kind-faced woman once gave her a half-burned crust of bread. The girl remembered that day for weeks, but today the woman turned her back. She acted as if she did not see. The broken girl's chest tightened. It was worse than being shouted at. To be invisible? It hurt more than anger. Children ran past her, their laughter ringing in the air. One of them kicked dust in her face by accident. Another child, older and stronger, saw her struggling and stopped. For a moment, the girl's heart lifted. Maybe he would help? But instead, he grinned cruelly. He bent down, whispered a word in her ear. Cursed. Then he ran off, laughing. The word stuck inside her mind. Cursed. She heard it too often. Some adults whispered that she had been punished by the gods. Some believed that touching her would bring bad luck. And so people avoided her. They crossed the street when they saw her crawling. They covered their children's eyes as if her weakness was a disease. Every sound, every glance, every whisper added weight to her small heart. Yet she did not break. She refused to cry where others could see. She saved her tears for the night when no one watched. The world around her grew louder as the day went on. The air filled with music, with trade, with shouting voices. Everyone was alive, busy, full of purpose. And she was left behind. She crawled out of the market and toward the edge of town. There, near the abandoned metal towers, she could be alone. The towers were old, broken machines from long ago. Some said they were relics from a forgotten war. Others said they had fallen from the sky. To the little alien girl, they were shelters. Their shadows gave her peace. She leaned against one, pressing her back to the cold surface. For a moment, she closed her eyes. The wind carried the smell of dust and oil. It was not kind, but at least it did not laugh. The girl watched ants crawl through the cracks of the ground. Tiny creatures smaller than her finger, but all of them moved with purpose. They carried food, working together, never leaving one behind. She wondered why her people could not be the same. She remembered once trying to follow the other children. She had crawled after them, dragging her legs behind her. They were chasing a ball, their voices full of joy. She wanted to join. She wanted to be part of something. But when she reached the edge of their circle, they stopped. The ball dropped. Their laughter ended. One child had shouted, "Go away, broken one." Another picked up a stone and threw it at her feet. It did not hit her, but the message was clear. She was not welcome. She was never welcome. Now, sitting in the shadow of the tower, she pressed her hand against her chest. Her heart beat weakly but steadily. She thought of the stars above. They were far away, yet they seemed to shine only for her. Maybe, she thought, maybe the stars understood. But stars were silent. They never answered. The day grew hotter. The stones beneath her hands burned and her lips cracked from thirst. She crawled back toward the town, her body trembling from weakness. At the well, she tried to pull herself up to reach the water, but other people pushed past her, filling their jars and buckets. She was too small, too weak, and too low to the ground. She whispered, "Please," but no one heard. At last, a drop of water spilled near her. She pressed her lips to the stone and drank what she could. It was not enough, but it kept her alive. When the sun began to sink, the girl returned to her shadow at the fountain. She wrapped her arms around her knees and stared at the world that had no place for her. She did not know it, but eyes were already watching her. Far away, someone new had stepped onto this world. Someone who had not heard the word cursed. Someone who might see her not as broken, but as a child worth saving. The world was cold. The people were colder. But change was coming, and it would begin with a stranger. The sun had almost set when the stranger arrived. The skies were painted red, and the 2 moons were beginning to rise again. Dust swirled in the streets as merchants packed their stalls. Children hurried home, their laughter fading into the distance. But on the edge of town, where the broken fountain stood, a man appeared. He did not look like the others. His skin was different, his clothes strange. He carried no heavy tools, no market goods. Only a small pack rested on his shoulder. His steps were calm, steady, almost too quiet for the noisy world around him. He was human. No one knew where he came from. Some whispered that he had walked out of the desert. Others claimed he had fallen from the stars. But the truth was he had simply arrived, and already the people looked at him with suspicion. The man noticed their eyes, but he did not care. He had seen stares before. He had crossed many worlds, and on every world the same eyes judged outsiders. He kept walking, steady and silent, until he reached the center of town. And then he saw her. The little broken alien girl was sitting by the fountain, her arms wrapped tightly around her knees. Her face was half hidden in shadow, her eyes fixed on the ground. Dust clung to her thin hair, and her body shook with weakness. She looked more like a ghost than a child. The man stopped. Something inside him tightened. He had seen poor children before. He had seen pain, hunger, and fear. But this was different. The people around her stepped carefully, as if she were not there at all. Their eyes passed over her, cold and blind. He could not understand it. How could they walk past a suffering child as if she were part of the stone? The girl lifted her eyes for a moment. For the first time, her gaze met his. It was not a long look, just a second. But in that second, he saw it. The sadness, the silence, the tiny spark of hope that refused to die, no matter how cruel the world was. He moved closer. The girl blinked, surprised. No one ever came closer. She expected him to spit or curse or whisper the word cursed like the others. She turned her head, trying to hide. But his voice stopped her. "Are you alone?" His voice was calm, deep, and gentle. She had not heard such a voice in a long time. Slowly, she turned back to look at him. Her lips trembled, but no sound came out. The man knelt down to her level. He did not stand over her like the others. He lowered himself so that their eyes were equal. "Do you have food?" he asked. The girl shook her head. Her arms tightened around her knees. The man opened his pack and pulled out a piece of bread. It was not much, just a traveler's ration. But to the girl, it looked like a treasure. He held it out. She stared at it, frozen. No one had ever offered her food without mockery. She waited for the trick. She waited for him to pull it away and laugh. But he did not move. His hand stayed steady. At last, she reached out with trembling fingers and took it. She bit into the bread carefully, as if it might disappear. Tears filled her eyes as she chewed. It was the first time in years she had tasted kindness. The man watched her quietly. He did not ask questions. He did not tell her she was weak. He simply let her eat. When she finished, he asked softly, "What is your name?" The girl hesitated. She almost said, "I have no name." But something in his eyes made her want to remember. Slowly, she whispered the name she had buried long ago. Her voice cracked, but he understood. He nodded once, repeating her name as if to make it real again. The man's gaze shifted to her legs. They were thin, twisted, barely able to support her. He frowned. "Can you walk?" Her silence was the answer. She lowered her head in shame, but the man did not laugh. He did not call her cursed. Instead, he said, "I will help you." The girl froze. No one had ever spoken those words to her. Not once in her life. She stared at him, her mouth open, her heart pounding. "You will help me?" she whispered, barely believing it. "Yes," the man said. His voice was steady, as if it was the simplest truth in the universe. "You will walk again." The girl wanted to believe him, but fear wrapped around her heart. She had been disappointed too many times. She looked into his eyes, searching for a lie. But there was no lie. His eyes carried weight of someone who had seen pain and someone who did not turn away from it. For the first time, she felt something strange. A warmth, a possibility. Around them, the townspeople watched. Some muttered. Some sneered. One voice whispered, "Foolish human. He will learn the curse." But the man did not hear them. His focus was only on the girl. He reached out his hand not to drag her, not to command her, but simply to offer it. The girl stared at that hand for a long moment. Then slowly she placed her small fingers in his. It was the first time anyone had touched her with kindness. And in that moment, under the fading light of 2 moons, the cold world shifted. The broken girl was no longer invisible. She had been seen. The night air was cool, and the little alien girl could still feel the warmth of the stranger's hand in hers. It was such a small thing, just a hand, but to her it was everything. No one had ever touched her without cruelty or disgust. No one had ever knelt down, looked into her eyes, and spoken as if she mattered. The man did not let go too quickly. He held her hand with calm steadiness, not pulling, not forcing, just holding as if to say, "I am here." For the first time, she did not feel invisible. She felt seen. "Eat more," he said softly, handing her another small piece of bread. She took it, her fingers trembling. As she ate, he watched the market around them. People had stopped to stare. Their whispers carried through the air. "Foolish outsider. He does not know the curse. He will waste his time." The man ignored them. His eyes were calm like still water. He did not argue, he did not shout back. He let their voices fade into the noise of the town. The girl, however, heard every word. Shame burned inside her chest. She wanted to pull her hand away and crawl back into the shadows. She wanted to whisper to him, "Leave me. Save yourself from the curse." But before she could, his voice stopped her. "Don't listen," he said simply. "They are wrong." The words pierced her heart like light cutting through darkness. No one had ever said the others were wrong. All her life she had believed their whispers, their laughter, their cruelty. But this man, this stranger, spoke with such certainty that her silence cracked. Her lips parted. Her voice was faint, barely louder than the wind. Why help me?" The man's eyes softened. For a long moment he said nothing. Then he answered, "Because you deserve it." The girl's breath caught in her throat. Deserve? She had never thought of herself that way. She had always believed she was worthless, cursed, broken. But in his words she felt something new, something terrifying but beautiful. Hope. The man looked at her legs again. They were too thin, bent in unnatural ways. He studied them carefully, his mind working. He had seen machines on other worlds. Machines that carried the weak. Machines that gave strength to the broken. He did not know how yet, but he knew one thing. This girl would not crawl forever. He reached into his pack again and pulled out a small flask of water. "Drink," he told her. She obeyed, lifting it slowly to her lips. The water was cool and fresh. It slid down her throat like a gift from the stars. She closed her eyes, savoring every drop. When she finished, she whispered, "Thank you." Her voice was shaky, but it was the first time in years she had spoken those words with real feeling. The man nodded once. "You are welcome." The moons climbed higher above them, glowing silver. The people of the town drifted away, leaving only silence. Still, the man remained by her side. He did not rush. He did not act as though his time was wasted. He simply sat on the broken fountain beside her, as if being near her was enough. The girl stared at him, her heart full of questions. Who was he? Why had he come? Why did he care? She wanted to ask, but fear held her tongue. Still deep in her chest, the spark of hope burned brighter. The man finally spoke again. "Tomorrow I will return." Her eyes widened. Return? No one ever promised her such a thing. People only passed through her life like shadows, gone before she could remember their faces. But he said it calmly, like a fact, not a dream. "You will?" she whispered, afraid he might take the words back. "Yes," he said firmly. "I will come back, and I will find a way to help you walk." Her mouth opened, but no sound came. She wanted to cry, to shout, to cling to him. Instead, tears slid down her cheeks in silence. She lowered her head, ashamed of the tears. The man reached out again, lifting her chin gently. "Don't hide," he said. "Your tears mean you are strong, strong enough to keep living, even when no one stood beside you. That is not weakness." The girl's heart trembled. His words struck deeper than anything she had ever heard. For the first time in her life, she did not feel like a burden. She felt worthy. The man stood slowly, adjusting his pack. He gave her one last look, his eyes steady. "Rest tonight. Tomorrow everything begins." She nodded, though she could barely believe it. When he walked away into the darkness, the girl sat motionless, staring after him. The cold wind brushed against her face, but she no longer felt only the chill. Inside her, warmth spread like a tiny flame refusing to die. For years, her world had been filled with silence, cruelty, and loneliness. Now, for the first time, there was something else. A promise. A stranger's words echoed in her mind as she drifted into sleep. You will walk again. And in her dreams, she did not crawl. She stood tall, running under the stars, her laughter rising into the night. The next morning came with golden light spilling across the dusty town. Merchants shouted, children played, and life continued as it always had. But for one little alien girl, everything felt different. For the first time, she woke not with dread, but with anticipation. The stranger had promised to return. Her heart whispered the words again and again. Tomorrow, everything begins. She waited by the broken fountain, her fragile body trembling with hunger and exhaustion, but her eyes fixed on the horizon. Every sound of footsteps made her head turn. Every shadow made her heart jump. Hours passed and doubt crept in like a cold hand. What if he lied? What if he forgot? But then as the sun reached its highest point, he appeared. The human man walked steadily into the market, his strange clothes marked with dust from the desert. The crowd muttered as he passed. Their whispers carried the same sharp words as before. Fool. Outsider. He will regret it. But the man's eyes did not shift from the fountain, and when the girl saw him, her heart leapt. He had kept his promise. He knelt beside her again, pulling a small bundle from his pack. Inside were tools, wires, pieces of metal. They looked old, scavenged from machines around the town, but in his hands they became something new. I told you, he said calmly. We will try. The girl stared at the strange parts, unsure. She had seen machines before, but none that could change her fate. The man began to work. He shaped the metal into curved frames, fastened them with straps made from cloth. His fingers were skilled, careful yet quick, as though he had done this before on another world. The girl watched with wide eyes, her hope growing stronger with every movement. At last he lifted the device, 2 thin braces meant to hold her weak legs. Stand, he said gently. Her breath caught. Stand? She had not stood in years. Fear filled her chest. What if she failed? What if she fell again? And the little flame of hope was crushed. The man held out his hand. You are not alone this time. Slowly, trembling, she let him place the braces around her legs. The metal felt heavy, strange. The straps pressed into her thin skin. Her heart pounded as she tried to rise. At first, nothing happened. Her arms shook, her knees wobbled. Then, with his steady support, she lifted an inch off the ground. For a heartbeat, she stood. But then, she collapsed. The braces clattered against the stone and her body fell hard. Pain shot through her arms as she tried to catch herself. Her eyes filled with tears, not from pain but from shame. She wanted to sink into the earth. The man did not scold her. He simply said again. She tried. And failed. Again failed. Her arms bled from the stone. Her breath came in ragged gasps. The crowd that had gathered around them laughed cruelly. See, they shouted. She will never walk. She is cursed. The girl's tears spilled over. She looked at the man, her voice breaking. Stop, please, I cannot. I am broken. But his eyes did not waver. You are not broken, he said firmly. You are only waiting to rise. Her heart trembled at his words. No one had ever said such things to her. But the pain was too much. She wanted to believe, but doubt wrapped around her like chains. The man adjusted the braces, tightened the straps. One more time, he said softly. Just one more. She shook her head, whispering, I will fall again. Then fall, he replied. But fall forward. Something in his voice struck her like fire. Fall forward. Even failure he made sound like progress. She wiped her tears with her thin hand and nodded. Together, they tried again. The man's strong arms supported her as she pushed against the ground. Her legs trembled violently inside the braces, her whole body shaking. Slowly, painfully slowly, she rose. Her feet touched the ground. Her knees locked. She stood. The crowd gasped. It lasted only a moment before her body gave way and she fell back into his arms. But this time she was not ashamed. She had stood. The girl's chest heaved with exhausted breaths. Her tears flowed freely, but now they were different. Not only sadness, something else. Something brighter. The man set the braces down beside her. "It is only the beginning," he said. The people around them sneered, shaking their heads. "He will waste his life on her." They walked away, their voices bitter, but the girl no longer cared. For the first time, she had risen above the dirt. For the first time, she had touched the world from higher than the ground. That night, she lay under the moons with the braces beside her. Her body ached with pain, but her heart carried a strange, powerful warmth. The man had not given up even when she failed again and again, and deep inside her, the little flame of hope grew into a fire. She whispered into the night, "Tomorrow I will stand again," and though no one answered, the stars above seemed to listen. The days that followed were filled with sweat, pain, and failure. Every morning the man returned, and every morning the little alien girl tried again. Her body trembled. Her arms bled from crawling, her voice cracked from effort. She fell more times than she could count. Each fall made her heart ache. Each bruise reminded her of her weakness. But every time she fell, the man's voice was there, calm, steady, unyielding. Again. "Stand. Fall forward." The townspeople laughed at the sight. They pointed at the strange human who wasted his strength on the cursed girl. Some shook their heads in pity, others in disgust. But the man never turned toward them. His eyes remained on her and hers on him. And slowly something began to change. Her arms grew stronger, her grip steadier. The braces he built, though crude, began to feel less like chains and more like wings waiting to open. Every fall hurt less, not because her body was stronger, but because her spirit had learned to rise. On the 7th day, the man came earlier than usual. The suns had not fully risen, and the moon still glowed faintly in the fading sky. He set the braces before her and knelt. "Today is different," he said. The girl blinked at him, exhausted but hopeful. "Different how?" "Today you will walk." Her heart stopped. "Walk?" She shook her head quickly, fear rushing back. "No, I cannot." His eyes softened. "You can." The girl's hands trembled as she touched the braces. For years, she had dreamed of walking in secret, but to believe it might truly happen terrified her. Dreams were cruel things. They gave joy only to tear it away in the morning. What if this was another dream? The man helped her secure the braces around her legs, tightening the straps. He checked every piece, making sure they were steady. Then he placed both his hands around her arms. "Listen to me," he said. "Do not think of falling. Do not think of the crowd. Think only of the ground beneath your feet. Feel it. Claim it." She closed her eyes, her breath sharp. Around them, a crowd had already gathered. Whispers buzzed in the air. "Cursed child. Wasting his time. She will collapse again." The girl's chest tightened. Her heart screamed to crawl back into the shadows to hide. But the man's voice cut through the noise. "You are not broken. You are waiting to rise. Rise now." With all her strength, she pushed. Her arms shook, her body swayed. Her legs, held by the braces, bent painfully but held. Slowly, inch by inch, she rose. Gasps filled the air. She was standing. The girl's heart pounded wildly. The world looked different from this height. The stones, the market stalls, even the faces in the crowd, they were no longer above her. She was no longer beneath them. Tears blurred her vision, but the man's voice steadied her. "One more step. Just one." Her body screamed in protest. Her legs felt like fire. She clung to the man's arms, her fingers digging into his skin. But deep inside, the spark of hope roared like a storm. She lifted one foot. The brace creaked. Her knee buckled. The crowd leaned forward, waiting for her to fall, but then her foot touched the ground. One step. The girl gasped. She had done it. She had moved. Not crawling. Not dragging, walking. The crowd fell silent. The laughter died. The man's eyes shone with quiet pride. "Again." The girl shook her head, tears streaming down her cheeks. I can't." "You can," she tried again. Her body wobbled, her arms flailed, but with his steady support, she moved her other foot forward. 2 steps. The silence of the crowd deepened. No one breathed. Children who had once mocked her stared in disbelief. The girl's chest heaved, her face wet with tears. Every muscle burned. Every breath hurt. But she did not stop. She moved again. 3 steps. The crowd erupted, not with laughter, not with curses, but with stunned cries. "She's walking." The girl's knees gave out and she fell forward into the man's arms. But this time the fall did not feel like defeat. It felt like victory. Her small hands clung to his shirt, her face buried against him as sobs shook her fragile body. They were not sobs of despair, they were sobs of life, of joy, of freedom. The man held her gently, his voice low but firm. "You did it. You walked." The girl shook her head through tears. "Only 3 steps. 3 steps is the beginning of 1,000, he said. She lifted her face, eyes wide and shining through the tears. For the first time in her life, she believed him. She had touched a world she had only dreamed of. That night, as the stars filled the sky, she lay with the braces beside her. The pain in her body was sharp, but the fire in her heart burned brighter. She whispered to herself over and over, "I walked, I walked, I walked." And though the world had once called her cursed, the stars above seemed to answer with light. The miracle had begun. The town was never the same after that day. Whispers that once carried cruelty now carried disbelief. The broken girl, the cursed one, the shadow that no one had noticed. She had stood. She had walked. Only 3 steps, but 3 steps were enough to shake the world around her. The people tried to explain it. Some said it was a trick. Others claimed the human had used forbidden machines. But deep inside, every single one of them knew what they had seen. A miracle. For the little alien girl, life itself felt transformed. She woke the next morning with sore muscles and bruised arms, but her heart felt lighter than ever before. When she looked at the braces beside her, she no longer saw metal and cloth. She saw wings. She saw freedom waiting to unfold. The man returned just as he promised. And every day after, he came again. Together they trained. Some days she managed a single step. Some days she collapsed after only standing. Other days she surprised even herself, moving farther than before. Each attempt was a struggle, but each attempt carried hope. For the first time in her life, the girl looked forward to tomorrow. But not everyone was happy. The whispers of the town shifted into anger. "This is against nature," some muttered. She was never meant to walk. Others warned the man directly. "You will bring misfortune to us all. Leave her in the dirt where she belongs." He ignored them, always. And slowly their anger turned into silence, because no matter what they said, they could not erase the truth. She was changing. She was rising. One evening under the twin moons, the girl stood longer than she ever had before. Sweat rolled down her face, her body trembling, but she stood steady. The man released his hands from her arms, stepping back. For the first time, she stood alone. Her heart pounded in terror. What if I fall? But she did not. She stayed upright, her small figure glowing silver under the moons. Tears blurred her vision, but she did not wipe them away. She whispered softly, almost to herself, "I am not broken." The man's lips curved into the smallest of smiles. Step by step, her world grew larger. Where once she had only crawled the narrow alleys, she now walked into open spaces. Where once she hid from the market, she now crossed its stones with her braces clicking softly. The same children who had laughed at her now watched in awe, too afraid or ashamed to speak. She did not need their words anymore. She had found something greater. Hope. The girl and the man became an unlikely pair. She, once invisible, now visible to all. He, the mysterious outsider, now a symbol of something greater. Together they carried a message the town could no longer ignore, that kindness could change what cruelty never could. Still, the girl's journey was not finished. Walking was only the beginning. She dreamed now of running, of climbing, of chasing the stars. She dreamed of exploring the world beyond the dusty market, beyond the cold whispers. One night, as they sat together near the old broken fountain, the girl turned to him with wide eyes. "Why do you help me?" she asked again. She had asked before, but her heart longed for the answer once more. The man gazed at the sky, his face shadowed by the moons. "Because once I too was broken," he said quietly, "and someone gave me a chance. I promised myself I would do the same for another." The girl stared at him, her chest heavy with wonder. She wanted to ask more. Who had helped him? What pain had shaped him? But she saw in his eyes that the story was not yet ready to be told. Instead, she whispered, "Then I will help someone too." One day, his eyes softened. That is how the world changes. The stars glimmered above them, vast and endless. For the first time, she did not look at them with despair, but with possibility. They no longer seemed far away. They seemed like destinations waiting for her feet. The girl who could not walk was walking now. The girl who was called cursed had become a sign of hope, and the man who had come from the desert or perhaps from the stars had given her not just legs, but a future. The townspeople still whispered, but their whispers no longer mattered. The girl's steps spoke louder than their voices. Every step was a declaration. Every step was proof that even the most broken could rise. She was no longer the shadow by the fountain. She was no longer the cursed child. She was the girl who walked. And though her journey had only just begun, one truth was certain. The cold world that once turned its back on her could never erase the miracle she had become. The new beginning was not easy, nor was it perfect. But it was hers. And as she stood beneath the twin moons side by side with the man who had given her a chance, the stars seemed to whisper back at last, promising her that her story was only starting.